Hi everyone, what I thought we'd do today is have a little look at applying our repeat patterns onto fabric textures. There is quite an art to do this and you can spend an incredible amount of time doing it. But what I'm hoping to do is show you the quickest and easiest way to create a realistic image which looks like it's got your pattern wrapped onto it. So first thing we're going to do is just go onto the internet and have a look for potentially a white cushion. It's a relatively simple shape, so it's a good object to start with. I've just searched for large images and by going to tools and large and just search for white cushion. Something like this one here should be absolutely fine. I'm just going to drag it into Photoshop. Next thing we want to do is just to copy our pattern and apply it to our cushion, like so. You will see that it's likely that your pattern might be much larger or much smaller than the image you bring in. The image we brought in is still perfectly high resolution, but our pattern is pretty huge. So I'm just going to position it something like that. What I would try and do is ensure that your pattern is a bit larger than the surface you're trying to apply it to. This will give us a lot more sort of leeway in the adjustments. Next, I'm just going to drop the opacity right down just so I can see the pattern clearly and the cushion behind it. So you can see if we just cut the pattern out now around the cushion, the pattern does feel very flat and very sort of two-dimensional, and it doesn't seem to be kind of taking into effect the kind of curves in the cushion. So this is what we want to adjust. So what we're going to do is make sure you're on your pattern layer and you've got that selected. Just go to edit and we're going to use this tool, Puppet Warp. This applies this mesh all over your cushion and onto your pattern. So all we're going to do first of all is just create a series of anchor points. So this area here, the front of the cushion, is quite flat. So I'm going to create some anchor points on there. And what it will do is it will prevent me warping these areas here. But just be able to adjust and tweak these areas around the outside. So I've just put in kind of 5 or 6 points around there. Next, when you can then start pushing and pulling some of these areas. So I'm just going to try and squash them up a little bit, so they feel like they're tapering out as they're going slightly further away. So I'm just going to start pulling that in there, pulling this one across, like so. And when we've got this kind of really wrinkled up corner, I'm going to try and pull that in like so, twist it round, just so the pattern sits a little less evenly over those surfaces. You can spend a long time doing this if you're doing it really accurately, especially to more complex forms like dresses and things. You can spend a lot of time really trying to make it wrap. We've got a very organic pattern here, so it's quite easy to do. Whereas obviously if you're working with a striped pattern, you'd need to spend a lot more time trying to get it just right, because our eyes would understand much better how a stripe would fall round these corners. So that's not looking too bad. Next thing I'm going to do is just try and squash up these areas around the outside, just so they feel a little bit more condensed, like we're seeing more of them as we get closer to the edge. And again, obviously don't really worry about what's happening to the pattern around the outside, because we're going to be cropping that off in a moment. So I'm just really trying to push this up here, like so. When you're happy with it, you can just hit enter or just click the tick at the top of your screen. So we can see quite a bit of a difference there in how the pattern's forming around. If I just undo it, you see it feels much flatter. If I just redo it now, it does seem to hug these edges much better. If I was being really panicky, I'd try and get a bit more of a curve and things in there. But for the purpose of the video, I'll try and keep it brief. Do make sure that your pattern's nice and light so you can really easily see your background now, because all we want to do is start drawing around with our polygonal lasso, drawing around the outside like so. Try and be as accurate as possible. I'm going to pause the video here and I will just speed it up. and catch up with you in a sec. So I've now gone around the outside of my cushion quite accurately with my polygonal lasso tool, and I actually used the magnetic lasso for a little bit of it because I felt that worked actually quite well, because we've got a bit of a contrast between the cushion and the background. So I've created this selection area now. First thing I'd do is just go to select and mask at the top, and all I'd do is just adjust your radius ever so slightly, maybe just 1 point, just smooth it by 1, feather it by a pixel or so as well, and click OK. What this will do is it'll mean you won't have such a sharp outline. It will just be slightly feathered, so it doesn't feel like quite such a paper cutout. So make sure you're on your background layer. Obviously, at the moment we've just got the cushion selected, and if we hit delete now, we delete everything that's on the cushion. If we just go select at the top of our screen and just inverse, hit delete, we're now removing everything other than what's on our cushion. I'll bring the opacity back up. So now with this opacity on full, it feels quite artificial. We're not getting any of the shading come through from the cushion. So again, it doesn't help this illusion that the cushion is nice and shaped. So what I've discovered using this cushion, and do have a little play with the different blending modes, because they do have lots of nice different effects that you might like to think about with applying to your patterns. But what I found is if I go to overlay, this works quite nicely. Can we see it's kind of enriching the colours and burning them in the darker areas, washing them out in the lighter areas. I think that looks quite good, but it doesn't look like our original pattern. And if I put my original pattern alongside, it would feel like the colours have changed. But to get a nice balance, what I've discovered with this white is if you duplicate this layer, so just right click and duplicate. So we place an overlay on top of overlay. This is feeling really bright and rich, but again, we're losing a bit of detail in the white areas. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate the layer one more time. And with the top layer, I'm going to set that to multiply. Again, that's just washing out the layers below it. So it's not, if I turn those off, it's not making a huge difference. But if I now start just playing around with the opacities between the layers, so I might bring the opacity down on that. So I get some of the highlights, but still so that it's got some pattern within it. These feel quite bright, so it's slightly more vivid. So I might just drop the opacity down. Equally, you could just go to your hue and saturation, Command and U, and just drop the saturation a little bit on one of the overlay layers. But I think something like that works quite nicely, and it looks quite realistic for what we're trying to do. So just to recap your layers, layer 1, maybe 100% on overlay, duplicate it. Layer 2, 58% again on overlay, and then multiply layer, so duplicate it again, and that's just on about 40, and that works quite well. Depending on the image behind, you'll need to make changes to them. Just do it by eye, play around with each of your layers. You can always decide at this point to start changing some colors and things within it, tweaking some of those in one of the layers and looking how they kind of come through when you blend it. So it's all worth having a little play with. But of course, you can apply this same principle whatever you're wanting to apply your design to. So here's one of just a curtain texture, where again, I've just put a series of anchor points along here and then just tried to curve it so it feels like it's curving through and round some of these kind of loose pleats. On a curtain, again, I've applied it to a dress form here, just cutting out certain areas. I've not done this one brilliantly, I don't think. I really could have done a much better job on these quite severe creases. But again, it just gives you a little bit of an idea of how you can apply patterns onto surfaces and make them look fairly realistic. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Very best of luck.